The following episode features a historic article from the Nebraska History magazine. This article may reflect the language and attitudes of its time, and while it offers valuable insight into the past, may contain expressions or viewpoints that are outdated or offensive by today's standards. Any outdated terms do not reflect the current views or perspectives of the Nebraska State Historical Society. Welcome to the Nebraska History Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Goforth. Each episode, we explore articles written and published in Nebraska History magazine. Traveling shows were an extremely popular form of entertainment in the 20th century. In Nebraska, one man and his brother started a show that became one of the state's most popular productions. On this episode, we explore the history of that show through the 2017 Nebraska History magazine article titled Walter Savage Amusement Company by Rebecca Bowler. Traveling shows were a popular form of entertainment in the United States in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. They came in all shapes and sizes and consisted of anywhere from one person to hundreds of employees. Some shows served as families' supplemental source of income, while others were large business operations employing many people. Late spring and summer were popular times for theatrical troupe performances, carnivals, and circuses. Shows incorporated multiple entertainment styles, blending elements of comedy, dramatics, exhibitions, hands-on amusement, and music. Circus shows featuring acrobatic tricks and wild animals combined with Wild West shows full of rootin'-tootin' cowboys and savage Indians. Such a show traveling by railroad was common in the early 20th century. Occasionally, in order to compete, shows attempted to distinguish themselves. Traveling shows continually had to get bigger and better in order to attract customers. The Walter Savage Amusement Company was one of the most prominent traveling shows performing in small towns in Nebraska and surrounding states. From 1906 to 1941, the business and its entourage spent April through September working in Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, South Dakota, Wyoming, and Kansas. Though the length of engagements varied, the company usually spent several days in one location, offering a variety of entertainments including carnival rides and freak shows. How people spent their free time reveals intricacies, sometimes hidden, occasionally obvious, about place, time, and identity. What people did for fun in local places exposes, for instance, the complexities of what was occurring at the state, national, and global scales. People shape their cultural and physical spaces through entertainment, creating a cultural landscape which in turn shapes them. Knowing this, we can recognize how entertainment reflected social life and larger-scale trends of race, ethnicity, gender, age, class, nationality, and religion. With its emphasis on its characteristics of place throughout time, historical geography has much to tell us. At its core, a place's cultural landscape is an unwitting autobiography reflecting our tastes, values, aspirations, and even our fears in tangible, visible form. This study examines cultural landscapes through the historical geography lens, exploring the intersections of place, time, and entertainment in rural Nebraska, primarily from the mid-19-teens to the early 1940s. By showcasing the Walter Savage Amusement Company, we can discover some of the characteristics of traveling shows, an entertainment that was well known to people of the time, but has since largely been forgotten. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, many people felt that traditional Victorian American morality was under fire, and that the industrialized city was increasingly a place of corruption and stifling evil. If the American people, native-born European American Christians, that is, were to progress and flourish as a race, they must get out of the evil city. The Chautauqua was one of the main traveling shows that addressed people's fears of a declining moral culture. Starting in Chautauqua, New York, the movement focused on strengthening rural people's Christian moral and spiritual improvement. Chautauquas were comprised of a variety of entertainers, often from the East, traveling to rural areas throughout the country promoting Americanization, Victorian American style. Chautauquas were especially popular during summers in the last decade of the 19th century and the first 2 decades of the 20th century, providing a source of entertainment and good for all ages. They were held under the shade of a tent. Special areas near communities were frequently set aside as the Chautauqua grounds and for the days-long educational and theatrical bonanza. Hundreds of people would come to the Chautauqua grounds to camp for days or even weeks, making a vacation out of it. Events might include presentations, Christian sermons, orchestra music, world-famous opera singers, and magic acts. Some other traveling shows capitalized on social fears by promoting conservative rural values. The Walter Savage Amusement Company was one such socially accepted, squeaky clean business in Nebraska. The leading figure behind the enterprise was the company's namesake, Walter T. Savage. Savage kept his scruples, holding his employees to his own high standards. Patrons were impressed and had no reservations attending when the show was in town. The Omaha World Herald sang the company's praises, quote, "The crew is not made of crude fellows who flop in strange places. No, indeed, Savage and his company are welcomed with open arms each year in towns that he has played before," end quote. The company kept its business morally pure for a general audience. Newspapers reported that the show, quote, "never skinned the public," end quote. Employees even told of a time when one local Indian chief visited. He was so impressed that he promised to bring his entire family. Savage was surprised when the man returned with 200 others. Company records, unfortunately, provide no further information. The company's workers did not have the sordid reputation that carnies sometimes have today. Walter was strict, holding high behavioral and moral expectations of his employees. He only hired employees who were heterosexual and married, and fined and fired workers who gambled, swore, or even smoked. Workers could also be fired for being untidy or causing trouble. Within the region it toured, the company earned a reputation as, quote, "the cleanest show in America," end quote, with people referring to it as the Sunday School Amusement Company. Savage's conservative background was probably shaped by his childhood in predominantly white rural agricultural northern Nebraska. He was born on August 25, 1886, in the Holt County Post Office community of Deloitte. When he was a boy, the family moved to Humphrey and also to Lee. Savage's love of traveling shows began at the age of 12 when he attended a Ringling Brothers circus in Humphrey. From then on, he filled his childhood with adventures, trying to replicate on the farm the stunts he witnessed in the shows. He especially enjoyed tightrope walking acts and practiced at home with the rope tied between the barn and the shed. He also traversed a rope from the top of a windmill to the ground using an umbrella as a hopelessly ineffective parachute. The Savage family was an adventurous group. Members of his extended family living near Deloitte and Ewing became famous for their risk-taking. The Savage brothers were among Nebraska's earliest aviators, building and flying their first airplane in 1911. They barnstormed Nebraska and surrounding states for several years until Matt was killed in a crash in 1916 while skywriting. Though deeply shaken, the rest of the brothers continued. The summer of 1917, for instance, found them holding auto polo shows, playing polo using stripped-down automobiles, in addition to aerobatics with their 3 airplanes. Then known as the Savage Brothers Auto Polo Players, or more commonly as a family of daredevils, they guaranteed, quote, "to turn cars over at least 3 times, to smash 1 to 6 wheels at each game, and to raise hair on a bald man's head," end quote. Walter had already spent years in the traveling show business by the time his cousins took up aviation. He had run away from home at the age of 16 in hopes of joining the circus and similar ventures. Soon, picnic and fair organizers were employing him as a tightrope walker. In the very first years of the 20th century, the president of Wayne County Fair Board, Frank M. Griffith, paid Savage $5 to perform at the event. The young daredevil astonished spectators with his skills. In his spare time, he got to know some of the other performers. Someone introduced him to a young lady, Mabel Griffith, who had watched his performances. Griffith played the piano and performed tricks with her family's horses. The young tightrope walker was overtaken by her charm, grace, and personality. It was a propitious meeting. Walter and his brother Arthur formed the Savage Brothers Amusement Company in 1906 when Walter was just 20 years old. It started as a one-tent show with Arthur serving as one of the managers and as a performer. The length of stay in one location usually varied between 1 and 3 days. In 1910, for instance, the troupe was in Battle Creek on July 16th and showed in Elgin 3 days later. In the early 1910s, the company used the Flying Baldwins as its main attraction. The entertainers performed tightrope, high swing, and other daring acrobatic routines. Because the Flying Baldwins brought in so many paying customers, the Savages paid the group a hefty $300 a week. The Savage Players were another big draw. Consisting of dramatic companies from Chicago and New York, the troupe performed in a specially made canvas tent capable of seating 1,600 people. Except for Arthur, all the players were professional actors. They put on a variety of popular plays, including Abby's Irish Rose, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Mother's Millions, and Three Wise Fools. Arthur, using the stage name Elwyn Strong, was known for his ability to play a convincing Dr. Jekyll. Vaudeville acts were performed between scenes. Having such a theatrical production required a good number of employees, including usually about 15 actors, 8 stagemen, and numerous vaudeville entertainers. The Savage Brothers Amusement Company traveled to many towns after opening each season in Wayne, the company's headquarters. When the company arrived, local boys helped set up the carnival for an inside peek and a potential free ticket. Though the company traveled primarily in northern and northeastern Nebraska, it also visited south-central South Dakota. During the 1910 season, for instance, the company worked in 18 communities. Most, such as Laurel, Crofton, and Creighton, were located near Wayne in northeast Nebraska, but the entourage also traveled to Gregory and Bonesteel in south-central South Dakota. Gordon in northwest Nebraska was probably the farthest from Wayne that they worked. Though he and his brother were busy with their corporation, Walter thought it important to take college courses and enrolled at the Nebraska Normal School in Wayne. There, he came across his old acquaintance, Mabel Griffith, now one of the music instructors at the college. With their common history, the two had many warm recollections to share and reason to spend time with one another. Like Walter, Mabel Griffith had spent most of her life in rural Nebraska. Originally from the Wayne area, she grew up on a homestead 4 miles north and 1/2 mile west of town. Both her parents had been born in Iowa, her father Frank in Red Oak and her mother Elizabeth Reed in Burlington. Like Walter, Mabel came from a tough and adventurous family. Before they had children, Frank and Elizabeth lived in a chicken house while they waited for their farmhouse to be built. Once they moved into the house with a wraparound porch and a white picket fence, they got down to the business of farming, raising cattle and horses, and having a family. As one of 6 children growing up on the farm, Mabel sought out exciting activities. She enjoyed riding horses, using a red plush side saddle, and later learning to ride astride. She began learning the piano when she was 8. At the Wayne County Fair, she drove teams of horses, then played the piano for spectators. At such a tender age, she was so skilled at handling the high-spirited team of horses that she and her horses earned awards of $5 each for being the best driver and the best team. Since her parents were fairly well off financially, they could give Mabel schooling befitting of a young, cultured Victorian lady. After high school, she took classes at the Nebraska Normal College in Wayne, finishing her teaching course in 1902. Much of her training was in music, especially piano. Following her graduation, she briefly served as the assistant teacher of music at the college. Her education, skill, marital status, and money enabled her to attend the Boston's New England Conservatory of Music in 1903. She taught there 1 year before returning to the Great Plains. She then spent several years teaching music in numerous communities, as well as creating and selling oil landscape paintings. Mabel was the epitome of a cultured Victorian lady when she returned to Wayne and became reacquainted with Walter. Although their statuses differed, Walter was a student and Mabel a teacher, the two took to liking one another and soon decided to marry. Since it was customary for women to give up their careers once they married, on May 2, 1911, Mabel traded her teaching career in exchange for love and a life on the road where she would become an important part of the company. Another family relationship was turning sour. With the success of the Savage Brothers Amusement Company in the late 1900s and early 1910s, came disagreements between Arthur and Walter over the way business was being conducted and money allocated. Sometime after the 1910 summer season and before the 1912 summer season, the brothers had managerial disagreements and discontinued their professional arrangement. Arthur kept the stage name of Elwyn Strong and created a dramatic troupe, Elwyn Strong and Company. On October 13, 1914, his group performed The Call of the West at the Long Pine Opera House. This cowboy play, a romance of the early 70s with special scenery and effects, showed only once. In 1912, Walter and Mabel used $500 in capital to create their own production team, the Walter Savage Amusement Company. That year, the new company's management decided to stay closer to home, appearing only in northern and northeastern and east central Nebraska towns. In 1913, Walter and Mabel traveled farther and to more communities. After the usual season opener in Wayne, the entourage immediately headed west, playing in towns such as Ainsworth, Valentine, and Rushville. Next, they appeared in Chadron and Crawford. Continuing west into Wyoming, they performed in Casper and Lander, and then backtracked east to shows in Douglas, before turning to the south to play in Wheatland and in Cheyenne. The company continued south and east to Sterling, Colorado. In the second half of the summer season, the entourage slowly made its way back to Wayne. From Sterling, it headed east through Scottsbluff and Gothenburg, then headed northeast through Silver Creek and other towns, turning north after Tekamah, and traveling northwest back to headquarters via Pender and Wakefield. Overall, the Walter Savage Amusement Company showed in 22 communities in 1913, including 16 in Nebraska, 5 in Wyoming, and 1 in Colorado. Walter and Mabel's lives revolved around the company. They traveled from late spring to late fall, usually April to October. The outdoor carnival shut down when the weather cooled, and many of the performers returned to their homes across the country to await the next summer season. During the first few years of the business, the Savages hit the road with roughly 18 others, giving vaudeville performances at opera houses throughout Nebraska, Iowa, and South Dakota. After a show's finale, the company might remain behind and put on a dance. Winter travel could be uncomfortable. Instead of enjoying the usual luxuries of their Pullman train cars, employees spent nights in local hotels, many of which, quote, had heat only in the hallways, end quote. Mabel referred to the time spent in the dreary, cold hotels as miserable. As wife of the show's namesake and arguably a major decision maker, Mabel had numerous responsibilities. She was the accountant and secretary, keeping the finances and books in order. She occasionally worked with the ballyhoo, the rides and sideshows. During the winter, Mabel played piano for the vaudeville acts. Throughout the year, she performed serious piano pieces in the shows. She even kept a special little book, the 1899 A Graded Course of Studies and Pieces for the Piano Forte, filled with tunes appropriate for various occasions. She used the book often, for it is filled with her handwritten notes and symbols, such as stars next to tunes that she liked best. Performers returned to Wayne in early spring for rehearsals in the City Hall. In 1918, for instance, dramatic rehearsals began on April 24th and band and orchestra practices on May 1st. The season opened in Wayne on May 8th. For the 1914 summer season, management decided to cut down on the number of out-of-state showings, probably to reduce expenses. The company opened in Wayne and stayed primarily in northern and eastern portions of the state, adding locations such as Oakland, Newman Grove, and Lee. The company played for the Brown County Fair in Ainsworth, September 15th through the 19th. The 5-day event featured a family-friendly ballyhoo. The public could take a spin on a merry-go-round or Ferris wheel, or take part in various athletics, or watch an aerial bar performance or flying machine exhibition. For those most inclined to the arts and dramatics, there were band concerts or vaudeville shows. After Ainsworth, the company slowly made its way to southeastern Nebraska and northwestern Missouri. In October, after an appearance in Falls City, the troupe's train crossed the state line and closed the season in Concordia, Missouri. The company's management continued to modify their business to better fit its niche and maximize profits. The troupe traveled to 21 communities in the 1915 season, adding a few bookings to its circuit, but again, staying mostly in northeastern Nebraska. Chadron, about 350 miles west of Wayne, was the farthest point of travel. The concluding show was again back home in Wayne. In its first few years, the Walter Savage Amusement Company proved to be a success. What had started out as a one-boxcar show needed 8 boxcars in 1916 to haul equipment and more than 100 employees. The business was able to make new purchases, including an African ostrich farm, Oriental reptile museum, and numerous exotic birds to add to its already well-liked attractions. During the afternoon and evenings, the company offered concerts by the Savage Challenge Band and free acts on the community's streets. People could visit the many sideshows or take a whirl on a number of rides. In the evenings, they could also attend theatrical presentations by the Savage Dramatic Players. During the 1910s and 20s, the Savage Dramatic Players seemed to be the most popular attraction of the entire show. The company took its dramatics seriously. Because the public had loved her when she toured with the show 5 years prior, in 1916 the company again hired the popular Catherine Dale to be its lead actress. Al C. Wilson was stage director. Fritz Adams, Mae Wilson, O.T. Prather, Dick Elliott, Marvin Lendrum, Edwin Henderson, Mary Harbuick, and Ann Nelson played in the dramas. The actors put on numerous plays, including The Belle of Richmond, On the Border, The Girl of the Mountains, and The Prince of Liars. Each production had its own scenery background, painted by L.R. McNeil. The company continued to grow until it took a 20-car private Pullman train to carry its 125 employees, concession stands, tents, and equipment. The company must have been profitable, for the trademark red and yellow train alone cost $65,000. Since it also served as the employees' temporary home, numerous cars were set up as living suites. Many of them contained glamorous amenities such as silver basins connected to hot and cold running water and mahogany sleeping berths surrounded by mirrors. The ballyhoos rides and sideshows were located outside the big tent. Because it was so big, the company, quote, owned its own light plant and maintained a 14-man orchestra, end quote. Though today carnival rides tend to be run down, in the 1910s, the Savage Brothers Amusement Company and later the Walter Savage Amusement Company paid high prices to have new rides. These included the Eli Wheel, a Ferris-like wheel made by the Eli Company, merry-go-rounds, and revolving swings. Like other carnivals of the time, the Savage Brothers Amusement Company and its successor showcased numerous oddities. The novelties featured varied each year: snake charmers, trick horses, and wild animals like Madagascar pygmy birds were common. One year, a group called the Solardo Trio combined drama and peculiarity into a feature called Oddities in Jungle Land. The company also had a ballyhoo freak show. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries in the Western world, it was common for sideshows to feature persons with abnormal physical conditions. Because such people were rarities who frequently did not live very long, the public, fascinated by their conditions, considered them freaks of nature. At the time, people with such physical conditions had trouble finding long-term substantial jobs, so many chose to take on work in traveling shows where they would be appreciated and almost celebrated for their condition. Though the exact features varied year to year, people with abnormalities were always featured in the ballyhoo as part of the Savage freak shows. Nearly every performer had his or her own stand. There were Siamese twins. Armless Owens was a chap who ate with his feet. The only thing different about the George Thompson family was that George, the husband and father, was, at 32 inches, the shortest member. A popular attraction reflective of the times was Ma-Ho, the ape man, advertised as Darwin's original. Here supposedly was the missing evolutionary link between apes and human beings. Most likely, Maho was simply a man who had the rare condition hypertrichosis, which caused the entire body to be covered with long, thick hair. Weighing 480 pounds, Baby May was billed as the country's heaviest woman with the smallest stature. If you wanted to visit her, a friendly-looking gal, all you had to do was go to her stand and walk up the stairs to the stage where she sat in a plush chair. You could stare at her, examine as you walked all around her, and then come back down the stairs on the side. In addition to her size, people found Baby May fascinating because of her linguistic skills. You could visit with her and ask her to speak in any of 7 languages. By contemporary standards, these attractions exploited people who lived with abnormal physical conditions. When interviewed for the Wayne Herald in 1967, Mabel Savage argued that the company did not exploit such persons, adding that the performers took it well and viewed being a part of the traveling show as an honest career, which made them good money. Unfortunately, there are no records that express the performers' thoughts. Regardless of contemporary standards of political correctness and sensitivity, the Walter Savage Amusement Company was a business, profiting only by meeting the demands of its market. The company did so from the late 1910s through the early 1930s. 2 major reasons for its success were Mabel's accounting skills and Walter's standards. With so many employees and expenses, Mabel kept ledgers to manage finances. She tracked business correspondence and financial transactions, such as employee salary records. In addition to their wages, employees earned a bonus if they stayed with the show for the entire season. The yellowed, worn pages of each season's ledgers contain signatures of employees, verifying that they had received their wages in full. Many of the ledgers also contain loose receipts and statements. The company frequently paid for some of its employees' clothing. The 1916 ledger, for example, contains an itemized statement for Ivan Totten's garments. Unfortunately, the handwriting of the name of the person or clothing company to which the charges were made is illegible. It is also unclear what kind of work Ivan did. Nevertheless, among other purchases, in November 1916, Ivan charged a pair of socks for 35 cents, overalls at 95 cents, a cap for $1, a pair of pants worth $1, a suit valued at $15, and 3 sweaters, one at $1.50, the second at $4, and the other at $5. Working off the company's conservative, family-friendly atmosphere, in 1916, Mabel and Walter Savage introduced their only child, Walter Jr., to the show when he was 3 weeks old. But with their new responsibility, the couple couldn't go on living as before. Walter and Mabel ceased their winter travels in exchange for a quiet time at home in Wayne. Walter Jr. was not the only child who traveled with the company. Many entertainers brought their children along. Some even allowed their sons and daughters to be involved in the entertaining. A Mr. and Mrs. Henderson let their son, Lyle, perform. After several years of working for the company, young Lyle went on to Hollywood, taking his mother's maiden name and working hundreds of acting jobs as Lyle Talbot from 1931 to 1987. As one of the Screen Actors Guild founders, he acted in numerous movies, such as A Shriek in the Night, Shirley Temple in Our Little Girl, and Untamed Woman. He appeared in television shows like Hopalong Cassidy, The Lone Ranger, Leave It to Beaver, and The Lucy Show. A spot in a 1987 episode of Newhart was his last gig. Incidentally, other feature entertainers, such as movie actors Fritz Adams and Dick Elliott, also got their professional start while working for the Walter Savage Amusement Company. People of all ages enjoyed the company's entertainments. Like Walter, during his own childhood, children and young adults were enticed by the adventure and romance of traveling shows. Children really did dream of running away to join the circus. As a result, some authors wrote fictitious children's books with moral lessons that taught the negative realities of circus life. James Otis's 1881 Toby Tyler, also known as 10 Weeks with a Circus, chronicles the story of a boy who discovers the miseries of trading his carefree childhood for the drudgery of working for a corrupt traveling show. Walter occasionally received letters from parents granting permission for their child to work for their company. On the small lined page ripped from a complimentary Elwood Fence Company notebook, Mr. and Mrs. H.P. Hendricks wrote perpendicular to the lines, scribbling a signed, undated note to the company, giving their permission for their son Earl or Carl to join the show. It is unclear whether or not such a document was legally binding, and no documentation indicates how Walter responded. The Walter Savage Amusement Company did not always know good times. Accidents were bound to happen. In the summer of 1916, for example, C.R. Wrightfield of Omaha was working on the company's Ferris wheel in Creighton when he suffered injuries to his foot and person. The company eventually paid him $15 in damages. In a December 2, 1916 letter written on letterhead from Omaha's Millard Hotel, Wrightfield acknowledged that he had received the cash settlement and that he would, quote, in no way hold Walter Savage liable for damages which may accrue, end quote. One of the worst experiences happened in Neely in the 1930s during a sudden, strong wind and rain that destroyed the large tent and most of the ballyhoo. The newspaper reported that, quote, a fearful ostrich joined a scrambling crowd, end quote, and the wind threw the bass drummer into a nearby river, but no one was badly hurt. Mabel assisted some of the female patrons who had been inside the tent watching the play. She took about 20 women to the train where she gave them dry clothing. Interest in the traveling show dwindled in the late 1930s, most likely due to newer types of entertainment, such as radio and motion pictures. Transportation changed. The company left the trademark yellow and red train on the tracks and began using trucks to move the show. Walter sold the train piece by piece over several years. In 1941, after 35 years of traveling the circuit, the Savages finally sold their business and retired to their home in Wayne. Their exact reasons are unknown. They were growing older and may have simply just tired of living on the road. Health may have also been a factor. Walter suffered from gallbladder disease, acid reflux, and Parkinson's disease. In order to treat his gallbladder condition and acid reflux, his doctors gave him a detailed description of the foods that he could and could not eat. Walter was to drink plenty of water on arising, between meals, and on retiring, but he should not drink with meals or force himself to drink the water. He was to eat plenty of fruits and vegetables, but avoid eating too many potatoes and not eat them at the same meal where he ate bread. When he started to feel better, Walter could eat items like sour milk, mutton, and gelatin desserts. Above all, Walter should avoid overeating. Though this special diet may have helped with Walter's gallbladder and acid reflux troubles, it could not fight his Parkinson's disease. Multiple attempts at treating the disease did not do any good. For the last 10 months of his life, the once vibrant showman lay ailing in his bed. 8 years after retiring, Walter Savage died in Wayne on September 20th, 1949, at the age of 63. Mabel lived for 40 more years. Her memories of the carnival days were not always pleasant. When asked later if she enjoyed the work, she replied, "No, not really." She tired of the hectic lifestyle when the couple was always on the go. She did, however, find the work interesting. Though Mabel had been essential to the company's success, she did not feel as if she was a major part of it. Typical of the gender role mentality of her generation, Mabel viewed the business as her husband's. She had simply dedicated her life to his ambitions. Given the chance, she said in 1967, she would not do it all over again. During the 1970s and 1980s, when she was too frail to look after herself, Mabel stayed at the Care Center, a nursing home in Wayne. She died in 1989 at the age of 104, taking with her countless memories of the heyday of the traveling show industry in rural Nebraska. Thank you for listening to the Nebraska History Podcast. To learn more about the Nebraska History Magazine, to listen to more podcasts, or to support our podcast by becoming a member of the Nebraska State Historical Society, go to history.nebraska.gov/podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and get notified when we release new episodes on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, I'm Chris Goforth.